everyone. Okay, this is the lecture for Primate Anatomy and Behavior. I just wanted to say once again to you guys, thank you for the patience with me, me being, not feeling well at all this week, and getting these lectures up a little bit later than I would have liked. I think I mentioned this in the last lecture that based on, because I pay attention to when you guys actually view these videos, and it seems as if the majority of you don't really watch them until the weekend, so maybe most of you wouldn't even really have noticed if I hadn't said anything that I posted them a little later, but I know there still are definitely a few of you who do watch them, on Wednesdays or Thursdays or Fridays, so I do appreciate you being patient with me with that, and thank you for all of the emails that I've received from you asking how I was doing and asking if I was okay and wishing me to get better soon. I really appreciate all of that, and I'm doing much better today, Saturday, but it threw off the whole week. And you guys all know what that's like, being sick, even if it's a little bit or a lot, even if it throws your week off by 1 or 2 days, it's just it's shitty that it just throws everything off so much. So I was just really not feeling well for probably 5 days, and it just I'm trying to catch up on everything, and I'm almost there. So hopefully by Monday I'll be fully caught up with everything. I started working on your exams, and those you should start seeing your grades. A few of you probably already have seen your grades, but those will probably all be graded in the next couple of days. Typically for assignments like that with the exams, I try not to take longer than a week. I understand you want to know how you did, and I don't want to keep you guys waiting, but I do want to take my time with them and make sure I give you guys notes and stuff. So, but like I said, you should everyone's grade should be in within the next few days. I think that's it in terms of anything else besides the lecture right now. Okay, so as you can see, I'm still not quite 100%, but feeling like 70%, so much better, and I'm hoping by tomorrow on Sunday I will feel almost back to normal, and one of the things I think about a lot is that when I get a cold, or even things like this where I have an adjustment to my medication, just throws things off for a few days. Being sick, definitely is shitty. And everyone gets sick, and we all have to kind of be understanding of that. But I still, and this is just my personal perspective on this, is that it's still nothing like what I went through a couple years ago. So I try to keep things in perspective a little bit, that as frustrating as it can be, that it could be worse. But also, like I said before, that I try to be understanding of you and accommodating to you when you guys reach out to me when you have concerns, and many of you have. And so I hope the same in return, that you understand that I'm only human, and that the lecture might not be up on the exact day that I said it was going to be up, but I will always communicate with you about that. Just as I have said to you, I hope you communicate with me, and as many of you have. So it's so unfortunate that we don't get to have the in-class experience. I've been teaching for 7 or 8 years now. I love teaching, and I love academia. I love learning. I love knowledge. I love all of that. I like being able to convey this information to all of you. But there's definitely something great about that in-person experience that we're just not getting right now, and that's unfortunate. I've communicated with a handful of you over email, and that's great. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I know I mentioned this I think on the first day, and I think it's in the syllabus too, that I am available for appointments if you want to do a video chat. I have Skype, but also we can do Google Meets or something, if any of you wanted to have that more one-on-one, even if you just had a question about something, you want a clarification on something. I get it. Sometimes, especially with the exam, you know, like, well, you guys just did the first exam, but like for the next one, let's say, for example, sometimes writing a lengthy email to ask a question or for clarification can sometimes be difficult. You know, I mean, I feel like I'm going on a tangent here, but email or text, sometimes it's hard to get across exactly what you're trying to say, or tone, or like all of that information. So sometimes having even just a 5-minute video is easier than an email. So like, but also I get like sometimes not dealing with people in person is you know, sending a message is easier to, like, it's just know that the options are there for you if any of you wanted to do that. All you have to do is email me and ask me like, hey, are you available on, like, you know, Thursday morning or something, you know, just let me know. But anyway, okay, so I don't think, I'm trying to think right now, I don't think there's anything else besides just getting into the PowerPoint. Like I said, your exams are, I started grading those. Real quick, the documentary. So the documentary links are up. So you have one that's you're supposed to watch on, and notes are due on the 14th. On the syllabus, I had one particular documentary listed, but I decided to not use that one, and I gave you 2 more options. So if you go, I posted an announcement with the details, but if you go into modules, you'll see it says like documentary links or something. It's like at the bottom below the lectures. And you'll see that if you click on the one for October 14th, like I said, I'm like 99% sure that's the date. You'll see that there are 2 options you can choose from, and just follow the directions there. It's pretty simple, but basically just similar to how you do, I'm sorry, I was thinking of a different class. Basically, like I said, oh my God, Alicia. The directions are there. The directions are clearly written out. But basically what I want is, I want you to watch the documentaries and enjoy them and learn something. And, you know, be entertained also. That's fine. So I'm not expecting some extensive notes. Please don't do that. And this is what I was going to say a second ago. Like, just like with the article reviews, you know, some of you gave me super extensive notes on those. And, you know, that's great, and I really appreciate the effort, but I'm not trying to overwhelm you with any extra work. So for the documentaries, it's just 10 bullet points, 1 sentence, maybe 2 sentences. Don't go overboard. You're not going to get extra points if you do more than that. So I just want to know that you were watching it. So give me 10 bullet points of, you know, something you found interesting or intriguing or noteworthy, or something you learned, or it's just a fact that you heard on the documentary. I just want to know you watched it throughout the documentary. That's it. So 10 1 to 2 sentence bullet points. Like I said, the directions are clearly written out. When you go into modules, you'll find it under the documentaries. But I've spent 8 minutes talking about stuff and not actually talking about the PowerPoint. Okay, anyway, you guys as a class are really good at, like, in terms of, like, in contrast to the other classes I'm teaching online. You guys seem to be really with it in terms of, like, what I'm expecting of you, and turning stuff in, and stuff being turned in on time, and understanding directions. So I don't worry about you guys as much. But if you have any questions, just reach out to me. But otherwise, so let's get started on this actual PowerPoint. Okay. Primate Anatomy and Behavior. I know when I started these PowerPoints, like I started doing this last semester, doing it online, and then, or lectures, not PowerPoints. And then this semester, I was like, because like if we were in class, I'd have you for an hour and 15 minutes. But I don't, also with these, I don't have like that interaction with you in person. So these obviously should be shorter, and some of them I think were like short, like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. But some of them I know, like, cause like this, I'm rambling for 10 minutes, you know, I'm sorry guys. I mean, but also I'd probably be rambling in class too, I don't know. You know, I want you guys to enjoy these lectures. I want you to learn something. I don't want you to be sitting at your computer being like, oh my God, is she gonna get to the point, right? There was a point to that. But, oh yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, like there's only 30 slides. This will take like 30 minutes, but I'm always surprised. Sometimes it's like really quick, and sometimes it takes a lot longer. So, like I said, in class, I'd have you for an hour and 15 minutes. So I try never to go over that. In fact, I don't think any of them are over an hour. Like maybe a couple are like right at the hour mark. But like I know what it's like to take an online class, and it's even though as I keep rambling, even though you're like, oh yeah, the video lecture's an hour, and in class, if I were going to class, I'd have to drive to campus, park, blah blah blah, be in class. It still feels, to me at least, my perspective on that is it still somehow feels longer, because like there's still prep. You gotta like set up your your notes and get your computer and make sure, like, if you live with anyone, like they're not making any noise, you can hear the. I get it. So oh my god, the whole point of that is I tried to keep these short, but sometimes I have things to say. I hope that doesn't bother you guys. Okay, seriously now, Alicia, get to the PowerPoint. Okay, slide 2. Primate Anatomy and Behavior. Okay, primates have 4 forms of locomotion. So the book might give you, and it might like group these together, give you an extra one, but like in terms of, this is what I want you to know. So this is how I would ask you if I ask you a question about this on the exam or something. So there are 4 main forms of locomotion: quadrupedalism, vertical clinging and leaping. That's a mouthful, so we say VCL, as long as you know what it means. Suspension and bipedalism. So I have a slide, I think, for each of these. These are the 4 main types. So locomotion just means how that individual moves about in the world, how, like with their body, how they move, Okay, so the first one, so slide 3, quadrupedalism. So it's in the name, and most of you, I think, are probably already familiar with this term, like a quadruped. It's in the name, quad, all 4, so they're using all 4. So like, the dogs, like dogs are quadrupeds. They move about in the world on all 4 limbs. So here you can see that in the PowerPoint slide. So they use all 4 limbs. So for primates, so they can either be arboreal quadrupeds or terrestrial quadrupeds. So arboreal means in the trees, terrestrial means on the ground. So they're still using all 4s, but there's going to be some slight differences in terms of the morphology and anatomy, whether they are an animal living in the trees or an animal living in the ground. Even if they're still using all 4s, there's going to be some slight differences, and I'm pretty sure I have a slide kind of showing some of those in a second, but it's all 4s. There's also some variation in terms for primates, like for apes. So like I have it right here, knuckle walking versus fist walking. So like chimps and gorillas, like and monkeys use what's called palmagrade. So like walking like flat on your hand for monkeys versus like gorillas or chimps might walk like on their knuckles, or roll their fist when they're walking. But it's still, they're using all 4 limbs. But it's just how those 4 limbs, or their arms, how they're kind of, how they are interacting with the ground might be slightly different. And then of course, if you're using all 4 limbs, all of the limbs will be approximately the same length. Some variation in that depending, but like don't stress about that. Slide 4, a little more on quadrupedalism. So those who are quadrupeds, they will have, not apes, because apes don't have the tail, but especially for like, so monkeys will have a tail. And I talked about this in the phylogeny and cladistics, when we talked about some of the stuff about primates specifically, that the tail, monkeys have tails, and the tails of arboreal quadrupeds, or the tails of New World monkeys, tend to be a bit longer. They also can use them sometimes as a 5th limb for balance. That's called a prehensile tail. And also when you look at these pictures, you can kind of see some of this. So like their thorax is deeper. So like imagine like your chest cavity. Like we are wide. We're wide. The length is longer this way than it is like front to back, right? But even imagine like your dog, or look at your dog. Like their shoulders are very narrow, and they're deeper, like from front to back, right, or posterior to anterior. So the shape of like their rib cage, that area is just shaped differently because they are quadrupeds. Their scapula, so like this is your shoulder blade. There's a bone back here. For us as bipeds, ours is what's called posterior. It's on our back, right? But for quadrupeds, it's on the side. So it's slightly different because of how they're moving. Like the whole muscle structure and skeletal structure is very different, just in terms of like locomotive differences. Posterior foramen magnum. So we're gonna get into some of the why am I blinking? Skeletal system, osteology stuff, I think on the next PowerPoint, but I might have mentioned this term, maybe not. So the foramen magnum, so if we're looking at the skull, there's a giant hole At the bottom of the skull, like where your spinal column attaches, you know, like brain nerves, all that stuff. There's a hole actually in the bottom of your skull. And in the bottom, because you're a biped, it's like on the bottom because your body sits below, like under your head, right? But for quadrupeds, that hole, that position of that hole is actually more kind of towards the back versus underneath because their body's behind them. So you could have just the skull of a primate. You're like, I wonder if this primate is a quadruped versus a biped. You could just look at the position of the foramen magnum. You wouldn't need anything below the neck. Like you'd be able to tell from that. Okay. So slide 5. Oh, so here's that picture, like I was saying before, the difference between a terrestrial versus arboreal quadruped. Just some slight differences. So I know I mentioned this before with Old World versus New World monkeys. Old World, because they tend to be terrestrial, they're a little more like moderate size, and those who are arboreal tend to be smaller because they're living in the trees. So you see like a general size difference, but also if you look at the picture there with the skeletal system, you can see that the tails of arboreal quadrupeds tend to be longer. Remember that they're using it for balance, so they need it to be, it's more functional. And it's kind of hard to see in the picture, but arboreal quadrupeds also, their finger bones tend to be a little bit longer. You know, they're gripping on the branches, so that's why. And if you go to slide 6, you'll see just a few more pictures of that showing the quadruped, arboreal versus terrestrial, just some of the slight size differences. And then, of course, you can see the tail length differences for those two as well. Slide 7. Okay, so then now here's the second one, vertical clinging and leaping, or VCL. You'll see at the bottom of this slide, there's a link to a video. It's like 3 minutes. Please watch it. Like, I'm not gonna like watch it and like you're not gonna see my reaction, but it's a really short and actually really cool video. So like click on that link. So this animal picture here is a type of lemur. It's called a shifaka, and they are vertical clingers and leapers. And the video will show you, like, it's literally how it sounds. Like, they leap and they cling to branches, to tree trunks. They leap and they cling, they leap and they cling. And because of that, their back legs, their hind limbs are longer because they have to use them to kind of push off. Their fingers tend to be a little bit longer because they're gripping. And the video shows this part too, is really interesting, is that they're vertical clingers and leapers. So if at any point they get to an area where there aren't any trees, they don't just suddenly start walking bipedally or suddenly start walking quadrupedally. They still do that vertical clinging and leaping motion just on the ground. So it kind of looks like they're skipping because that's what they're used to. They leap and they cling, they leap and they cling. So it's kind of interesting. It's very interesting. Okay, slide 8. Brachiation, and I have in parentheses suspension. So this is the form of locomotion where they use their arms or their forelimbs to move about in the world. So these limbs are going to be longer and going to have more muscles. They're obviously these are the limbs they're using to move about in the world. So in the picture is a gibbon. So they use this type of locomotion called brachiation. If you're wondering what's the difference between brachiation and suspension, they both use the arms. Brachiation, basically what that means is, like, and a gibbon's a perfect example of this, is they're moving very quickly. Often, like, you know, like when you were a kid, you probably were like on the monkey bars. Misnomer, because the only primate that does this is an ape, so they should be called the ape bars, but you know. But like, remember, like, oh man, I don't know if I'm dating myself, because I had this when I was in elementary school. I don't know if you guys had this, because I'm assuming most of you are probably like significantly younger than I am. But you know what I'm talking about, the monkey bars, you know, you're like swinging but so recall how that worked. Like, you were holding on and you grab the next one and you let go and you grab the next one, right? And even if you went a little fast, like, you know, you could maybe go fast. Some people were better at it than others. But oh man, if I try to do that now, I probably would. Oh my God, I tried to do a push-up the other day. I was like, yeah, I can do a push-up. Like, how could I not be able to do a push-up? And then in my mind, I was like, well, I haven't done a push-up, like a full, like a real push-up in like a decade. And like, because I had surgery, you know, on this side with on my breast, and then my arm, and they removed lymph nodes. I've had in the last couple of years, well, oh my God. In the last couple of years, I had some problems with my shoulder and stuff, just like the healing process of surgery and stuff. But I was like, yeah, I think even with that, I could probably still do a push-up or two, you know. And I barely could do one. I was like, oh my God, I'm old. I'm so old. Like, I'm telling you guys right now, it's going to catch up with you. One day you're going to be like 35 or 40 and you're going to be like, what happened? I don't even know why I told you that right now. But, okay, so like moving about with your arms, right? And the monkey bars. So, but gibbons, this thing called brachiation, they're going so quickly that as they are like going to reach for the next branch, they've already let go of with this hand. So there are points where they are literally not holding on to anything, and like they can go like I'd have to think about it for a second, but I want to say they can go up to like 30 miles an hour or something. Like if you Google gibbon swinging or something, like it's crazy. Like it's amazing and beautiful. Versus suspension is like a classic example of this is an orangutan. So they will suspend or hang, and you know they're hanging and then they're eating fruit or they're holding their offspring, and then you know they'll swing slowly. So it's the same type of locomotion in terms of that they're using these limbs, but the way they do it is quite different. Okay. So there's some other details here. So like I said, hand over hand, true brachiation versus semi-brach. That don't worry about that. Basically, what that means is like I said, with the very quick motion of when no hands are actually touching anything, is like true brachiation. Only gibbons can do that. Like as far as primates that exist currently, they tend to be a little larger. So gibbons are more medium-sized, but orangutans are big. Gorillas will also suspend too. Gorillas are kind of the odd one out, like because they'll walk quadrupedally. They will suspend. You know, apes, not just gorillas, but like apes in general, like us included. Like we tend to kind of like do a lot of different things. You know. Okay, so the next slide 9. So then you'll see. I had a clip. Okay, I'm pretty sure that's a gibbon. That's a YouTube clip of a gibbon. But you can see there in the picture the slightly larger orangutan kind of just hanging there, and then the gibbons moving very quickly. The gibbons a little more medium size. And slide 10, bipedalism. So this is the fourth one. So humans, we are bipedal. We are, of course, like I've said before, we are a primate, we are an ape, and we are bipedal. We are currently we're the only bipedal primate, but that's not how it's been. Like there have been other bipedal primates, but currently existing, we're the only bipedal primate. So some interesting things that happen because we are bipedal. So of course, like no surprise, our hind limbs or our legs are much longer, more muscle attachments and stuff. The muscle structure is much more complex because we're using that to move about in the world, and our whole body weight is now on top of just 2 limbs versus 4, so that completely changes the shape of everything else, like the shape of our pelvis, the shape of our the angles of our knee and our femur, the spine, like everything changes because we're bipedal. Let's see. Oh, we also have what's called a non-divergent big toe or non-divergent hallux. So our big toe, if you look at other apes like an orangutan or a chimp, their toes, their feet are just like their hands. So like our hands, we have all our fingers are in line with each other, except our thumb, which sticks out to the side. It's divergent, and all primates have this, an opposable thumb, right? For other apes, their feet are the same. Their toe sticks out. Humans, we are the kind of the weird one in that all of our toes are in line with each other. We don't have that big toe kind of sticking out to the side. So like other apes, like orangutans and chimps, can actually grip things with their feet the way we do with our hands. So when we see it, we think that looks weird, but in reality, objectively, like we are the weird ones because they all have it and we don't, you know, because we have this new trait that emerged. Okay, slide 11, and you can just see the picture of this woman walking bipedally, and then I have there also in this on this slide bonobos. So bonobos are an ape, and they have been known to walk bipedally. Now, like every ape, like you could probably Google chimp bipedal, gorilla bipedal. Like apes can walk bipedal, just like monkeys, like quadrupeds. They can walk bipedally on occasion. Like it's not unheard of. Just like if you Googled human quadruped, like you'd see people trying to walk quadrupedally, you know. but it's awkward. They don't really do it efficiently. Just like if you tried to walk on all fours, like you wouldn't be able to do it efficiently because your body's just not built for that. But bonobos, at least the ones like in on like preserves and stuff, the ones that are being studied, have been known to walk bipedally a little more than researchers thought they probably should have. Now there's like some debate about whether, like, if this was influenced by the researchers or not. Like, I don't know, but it was a thing. They did notice it, and so there was some interesting like hypotheses. Like if we looked at bonobos and how and why they were walking bipedally, if this would indicate maybe to some degree like why it had emerged in our lineage. Like what were the reasons? But just so you know, like just an interesting side note that bonobos have been known to walk quadrupedally. But when they do, they don't just suddenly start walking like this perfect bipedal stride like a human. They kind of waddle because their whole muscle and skeletal structure is built for quadrupeds, so they can't really quite do it. But they still do it a little bit more. Okay, than like other apes. Slide 12. Okay, so like you're like, oh my god, it's an equation. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do math or an equation. I just wanted to point out that we do have some very simple equations for understanding like locomotion in terms of like limb proportions. So like I said before, with quadrupeds, all their limbs tend to be about the same length. For for bipeds, our hind limbs or our legs are much longer than our arms or our forelimbs. For brachiators like a gibbon, their forelimbs or their arms are much longer than their hind limbs. And so there's just some simple equations to understand. Like if you just had, like a femur and an ulna, could you determine whether that individual was a biped or a quadruped, or like just know like yes you can, Okay. Slide 13. Dentition and diet. I don't know if I'm repeating myself. I know because even for the intro to cultural course, I go over some of this very briefly, and I'm trying to remember because I know I talked about some of this recently. I'm wondering if I talked about it with their class or if I did mention it in your class. And I don't have anyone in class to be like, oh no, you didn't tell us that, or yeah, you did. Okay. I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but we're just going to go through this. Okay, so there are 3 main diet types that I'm going to talk about briefly. The book might give you like another one, like gumnivore. Don't like worry about that one. Just I want you to know these 3. And so I'm looking at those middle 3 bullet points. So we have insectivore, frugivore, and folivore. So those are the 3. So for any ape, for any primate, you can classify us into any of those 3 categories. And like in terms of what is the majority of the diet. So insectivore, it's in the name, it's really easy. The majority of their diet for an insectivore is insects, obviously. And remember that if you want to know what a primate is eating, you want to look at the back teeth, the molars and the premolars. And so the insectivores are going to have those sharp, cusped molars, high cusp molars, and that's for breaking, down the crunching the insects. There's a term I want to say I'm going to get this wrong. It's on the tip of my tongue. Chitin? Oh man, someone correct me. In class, I'd be like, Google it real quick. You guys know what I'm talking about, but just like the insects. So in contrast to a frugivore, so the cusps. So a cusp on a tooth is like the part that's raised up. So for a frugivore, it's low rounded. So humans, we are a classic frugivore. Ancestrally, the majority of our diet was fruit. So we have this low rounded cusps on our molars. Now, of course, we have very recently introduced many more things to our diet, but like ancestrally, evolutionarily, we are like classic frugivores in terms of our teeth. And like for our ancestry, like that's what we were eating the majority of the time. And then the third one is folivore. So for these individuals, the majority of their diet is plants. So like a gorilla is a classic example of a folivore, eating like leaves and bark and things like that. Not necessarily the most readily nutritious, like the difference between like eating bark versus eating like a mango, you know. You could still get, you know, vitamins and stuff from it, but it's going to take your body a little bit longer, and your body's going to be more specifically adapted to that. Okay, so at the top though, I have some numbers, and that's what's called a dental formula. So you'll see it says humans, apes, 2, 1, 2, 3. Basically, that's when you look at a quadrant of the mouth, so upper right, upper left, lower right, lower left. It's the number of teeth and what type of teeth. So it's incisors, canine, premolars, and molar. So for humans, we have 2, like for any quadrant, we have 2 incisors, 1 canine, 2 premolars, and 3 molars. Obviously, if you haven't had like your wisdom teeth pulled or something. Old world monkeys, it's the same, 2, 1, 2, 3. New world monkeys, it's 2, 1, 3, 3. So they actually have 3 premolars. So that's just interesting. There's a whole reason why, but we're not going to get into it right now, but just know that. And then the bottom bullet point is there's a feature, I have a picture coming up in a second. It's called the tooth comb. And what that is my mind just blanked. Oh, so like in lemurs, did I mention this to you guys on the last one? I think I did on the phylogeny and cladistics one. On lemurs, they have their incisors jut out, and has some purposes. But like it's a very defining feature when you see it like on the mandible. So actually, go to the next slide, and it should be right there. You'll see that the tooth comb, and also like so. See the tooth comb? It's those incisors like pointing straight out. There's like a bunch of different reasons why they have that, but you don't need to worry about that right now. But really look at those molars and premolars. See how sharp those cusps are? That's what breaking those insects. Okay, so the next slide, slide 15. You'll see what's called a bilophodont molar. So in old world monkeys, we tend to see this. It's hard to tell on this like two-dimensional picture. Like, don't stress too much about this. Just kind of an interesting thing to note that the cusp pattern is very unique. They tend to be kind of on the edges of the teeth and kind of this line. It's just interesting to just kind of like, I'm not going to ask you like a weird question on the exam about bilophodont molars, but like if you take the lab, which I'm assuming many of you probably will, that accompanies this, it might come up. So just like have that term in your mind. Like, I remember that. Okay. Slide 16. This obviously is very important because I have a giant pink star and the font is huge and it's in bold. Large canine teeth among primates are not indicative of meat eating. Have I talked about that with you guys? I'm almost positive I did when we talked about sexual selection. I'm pretty sure I was like doing the same thing with it then. Doing it again, like get this through your mind, right? Large canine teeth among primates are not indicative of meat eating. Here I have some examples. So go to slide 17. You'll see the folivore. We have the mandrill, those giant canines. This individual is a folivore. So they're eating mostly plants. So like imagine like leaves and stuff. Sometimes fruit, occasionally insects, but mostly plant. Those teeth are not for, remember I said this, if you want to know what a primate is eating, you have to look at the back teeth. So for primates, the canine has nothing to do with what they're eating. The next slide, you'll see, slide 18, you'll see a chimpanzee, giant canines. They are a frugivore. Obviously, those teeth have nothing to do with what they're eating. Slide 19, there you have the gorilla, giant canines, folivore, classic folivore. And then go to slide 20, you have human and frugivore. Now you could say, okay, maybe in the last, like 2 million years, like we've introduced a lot more to our diet. We could be maybe classified as omnivore. Like that's up for debate. But like it's not up for debate that we clearly have a more broad diet for sure. But obviously look at the canine. Like where is it? Like you can barely tell, right? You can tell only if you count. It's really basically our canine now is essentially like another incisor. It doesn't really have a specific function. And so and humans do eat meat, and so the canine has nothing to do with that. Like the canine for primates has nothing to do with the food that they're eating. It has everything to do with sexual selection, which we've talked about before. And then go to slide 21 and you'll see, so this is a juvenile chimp, so the canine is still fairly small, but the reason I put this picture is I wanted you to see like the back teeth. So look at those molars. Those look very similar to your own molars. Like if you're like, oh, I'm looking, you know, like very similar, right? Low, rounded, smooth cusped molars, classic frugivore. So chimpanzee, human, classic frugivore. Okay, slide 22. Sexual dimorphism. Like I said, a lot of this should be, I think, is a repeat of what we talked about when we talked about sexual selection, which is like repetition's fine. Hopefully I don't make like any of the same jokes or something. I don't know. Okay, so sexual dimorphism, a difference in males and females based on size, shape, color. It can be substantial or slight. So humans and chimpanzees are examples of it being like slight or like moderate. You absolutely can tell the difference between in a male, in a chimp or a human, the difference between a male and a female, primary and secondary sex characteristics. Oh my gosh, secondary sex characteristics. You can absolutely tell. There is obviously some body size differences, but then like pictured here, the gorilla is more substantial, huge, significant differences in size between male and female. So female gorillas tend to be about like 200 to 250. Male gorillas are around 400 pounds, so they're literally like twice the size. But a lot of other primates have like color differences, indicating like sexual dimorphism. Like males tend to be the ones with all the color, whether it's like, you know, on their fur, hair, or their face or something, and the females tend to be the ones that don't. Okay, slide 23. What is so the social structure? So I think I have 5 listed. Okay, so the first 2 on slide 23: solitary and monogamy. So monogamy is probably a term you've heard of. I feel like I literally had the same exact slides on the one about sexual sexual selection, but hopefully we're not getting too much of a repeat. So solitary, it's one adult female with an offspring. So like the male and the female will come together at certain times to mate, but the male doesn't stay around to help raise the offspring in any way. And then monogamy, obviously one male, one female, and then any offspring they might have. Go to slide 24, and then 3 more. So polyandry, polygyny, and then multi-male, multi-female. So polyandry is when there's one adult female and multiple males. Typically, when this happens, it's no more than 3 males. It's usually like 2, maybe 3. But then polygyny, where it's one male and multiple females, there can be like 6, 7, 8 females. Gorillas are a really good example. So you see that picture right there. They're kind of all huddled together, so it's kind of hard to see, but there's definitely a male, and there's at least, I think there's 5 females in that picture. So that's very common. When this is the point, when you have extreme dimorphism, you do not have monogamy. And then multi-female, multi-male groups. So like chimpanzees are a really good example of this one. So they don't necessarily pair bond up like for life or anything, but they don't have harems like a gorilla either. So slide 25, and this is the point of this, which I think I talked about before on the PowerPoint about sexual selection, was taking into account this idea of sexual dimorphism, that difference between males and females, and how it maps onto social structure. So in this picture we have the gibbon. They are monogamous. They are what's called monomorphic. You cannot tell the difference between a male and female unless you look at their genitalia. So some gibbons will be a little bigger, a little smaller, but it does not have anything to do, it's just natural variation. It has nothing to do with which one's male or female. You cannot tell unless you literally look. So like, I think I mentioned this before to you guys, like a dog, dogs are really good examples. It's not as if, you know, all big dogs are male and all small dogs are female. That's not how it works, right? Or all like black dogs are male and, you know, white dogs are female. That's not how it works. You literally, you have to look. You don't know just by looking at a dog unless you look at their genitalia. There's no way to know. So gibbons are the same. And then you have, let's see, on the far right, we have some kind of a baboon. Clearly a huge size difference and color difference between the male and the female. And then you have humans in the middle, where our dimorphism is definitely there, but it's a little more moderate, slight to moderate. So what does this say about where we kind of are in terms of that social structure? Because this is the whole point of sexual dimorphism, is that it is because there's competition between males for access to females. So when we see males being really large, it's because they have to fight other males. When we see those large canines, remember the large canines among primates have nothing to do with food. It has everything to do with sexual selection. So either in terms of like scaring or threatening, or in an actual fight, the males can, can be used as a weapon. So when you see extreme degrees of sexual dimorphism, it indicates that there is competition for access to females. When there is no dimorphism or very little dimorphism, it indicates that that competition is lessened or is essentially absent. So with humans being kind of somewhere in the middle in terms of dimorphism, what does that say about our social structure? And so this is the question: are humans naturally monogamous? How much do I want to get into this right now? I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys before. I feel like I definitely talked about serial monogamy. I feel like I even wrote it down. I feel like I absolutely did with your class. Serial monogamy, we talked about this, right? Oh, I wish you guys were here to answer my questions. Humans are really good at serial monogamy. That's all I'll say. I'm like 99% sure we talked about this. I'm not going to repeat myself. You guys are probably not wanting to hear me repeat myself. Okay, slide 26. So we just had some of this on the previous PowerPoint. Just a little, I just added it again just to reiterate some of the things about primate sociality. So strong mother-infant bonds, the fact that we, at primate infants, whether it's human or a lemur or a chimpanzee, whatever it is, that we have a long period of being a juvenile, probably because of it linked to the fact that we have a lot of learned behavior. There's a strong mother-infant bond. So we talked about this in the previous one. Okay. Slide 27. Okay. Like I said, I'm not going to watch these videos and then have you guys see my reaction. But I will tell you, these are really good videos. Don't overlook them. In fact, I will ask a question on the exam about, I think, maybe 2 of these videos. There's a handful on these next few slides. Let's see, slide 27, there's some on primate intelligence. Slide 28, aggression. Slide 29, compassion. Slide 30, equity. Please God, watch this video. It's great. The one on slide 30. If you don't watch any of them, watch them. It's so good. But primate intelligence too. There's probably like 7 or 8 videos. They're all really short. Please watch them. They're really good. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna be like, no way. They're really good. And I will ask a question on the exam about them. So please watch those. Moving on to slide 31. Okay, so theory of mind. There are also some clips there. Please watch those, but I will talk about this a little bit. So theory of mind basically is this idea that, and not every animal has this ability, but what this concept is that, so like humans have this theory of mind. It basically means that you as an individual have your own thoughts and desires and perceptions, and you recognize that other people, separate from you, also have their own thoughts, desires, perceptions that can be different from yours, can be similar, but can be different from yours. And you might be thinking, yeah, of course, but not every animal has that ability to understand, they are a separate entity in the world, other individuals exist apart from them, that they don't have the same perceptions. So this is a really unique thing, and not every animal has this, and typically what we see is that animals who have this ability actually tend to have higher cognitive ability. And so there are multiple tests to be able to tell, does an animal have self-awareness essentially. And so that's what those clips get into. So there are a few different tests, but one of them is what's called the mirror test. So they'll put like a why am I blanking? What's the word? Like a oh my God, Alicia. Like if I took some paint and like put a little bit on my face, what's that called? Like I want to say swatch, but that's not the right word. You know what I'm talking about. And if I didn't know that, but if I saw myself in the mirror, like passing by a mirror, I'd be like, oh, what's that? Like I try to get it off, right? Because I recognize that is me. I see myself in the mirror. I understand like I'm a person in the world, but not every animal does that. And in fact, even just regular mirrors, like a lot of animals, when they see themselves in a mirror, they don't understand that it's them. They think either they don't comprehend what they're seeing, or they think it's like another animal. But animals who have this concept of theory of mind, who have that self-awareness essentially, will recognize themselves in the mirror. So apes have this. Not all primates do, but I have the picture right there with the magpie. So magpies and crows, I think I mentioned this before, like extremely intelligent. They have this ability. Elephants, no surprise there. Quite a few animals, but not every animal. And so, like I said before, typically this idea maps onto like higher cognitive ability, and it's just very interesting. In fact, like where was I recently? I saw a crow, and I think it was when I was in California, like a couple months ago. And when you start learning stuff, you're like, God, like you start seeing, you're like, yeah, they're smart, right? And then like, at least this is me, like you're like on Google and YouTube, like Googling like crows intelligence, you're like, oh my God, you know, who knew, who would have thought? But it's just it's incredible, it's amazing. And then the last slide 32, language. So I was surprised when I taught this class last semester that when I said Coco the gorilla, a lot of my students didn't know who that was. And I grew up with Coco the gorilla, and she passed recently. But she was a gorilla who was taught from a very young age American Sign Language. And so she was able to communicate. And there's a couple video clips, please watch those. But also you could Google, and there's probably like hundreds of clips of her on YouTube with her using American Sign Language to communicate. It is incredible. Like so other apes like gorillas, but also bonobos and chimpanzees and orangutans like have been taught sign language as well. Like they have that mental ability to like. I think we take it for granted the complexity and symbolism of language and language ability because we just do it every day. We don't think about it. But for another animal to literally communicate, like a gorilla it is amazing. It is so amazing. And so don't think like the other animals, especially those who are really closely related to us, like they absolutely have that mental capability to understand, given the right tools, like I said with Coco as one example. Okay, so like I said, please don't skip those videos. I took the time to put those links in there. I picked some really good ones. I'll tell you right now, let me just look real quick. The one on equity is like great. Please watch that one first, maybe. They're all good. The one on, I want to pull this one up right now just to double check it's the one I'm thinking it is. Because my computer decides not to work. Let's see, is it gonna work? Okay, it's thinking about taking its time, but no worries. I'm almost positive the ones on primate intelligence are the ones about memory, which are really good, but they're all good. The ones on, I'm not gonna tell you not to watch any of them. They're all really good. But like I said, there's like a handful, and they're all fairly short, so take the time to watch those. And I will be asking a question about one or two of them on the exam. Okay, so we're at 49 minutes. It's always longer than I think. Okay, so that's it for Primate Anatomy and Behavior, and I will see you guys on the next one.